So if you haven't heard, in a matter of a couple days, President Trump gave an ultimatum for peace in the Middle East, and within days, Hamas responds, and then Israel responds by saying they're accepting these terms. And everybody apparently now is going to move forward with this. But what's very strange and interesting is that there's a lot of reference that Trump talks about with regards to Bible prophecy, especially as it relates to Israel in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and as well as the end time. So let's talk a little bit about this, as well as some implications. Now, let's first look at Hamas's response to the Trump proposal. They say that within this framework, which is basically the whole proposal of ending the war, exchanging prisoners, providing aid, and all of this other stuff, it says that, and in a manner that achieves an end to the war and a full withdrawal from the Strip, the movement announces its approval of releasing all occupation prisoners, both living and remains, according to the exchange formula contained in Trump's proposal. And look at this line. The movement also reaffirms its approval to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a Palestinian body of independents, technocrats based on Palestinian national consensus and supported by Arab and Islamic backing. Now just keep that in your head about movement of people and handing over authority to people. Because look at what Trump says afterwards. I believe they are ready for lasting peace. He keeps talking about lasting peace. Israel must immediately stop the bombing of Gaza so that we can get the hostages out safely and quickly. And in my last video, I talked about how there's a stronghold over the people, not only Hamas and the Israelites, but just everything else in between, because again, they are being pitted against each other. A lot of people think it's Hamas versus Israel, and in a fundamental sense, from a biblical perspective, that is true, because if you're not for God, then you are against God. From the perspective of humanity, these guys, in some sense, they could care less because they want to live. They want to live out their life. They want to provide for their families. But because they're constantly told to hate this person and this group, this religion, it's allowing this whole friction to be happening. Now, here's where it gets crazy interesting. Trump says after negotiations, Israel has agreed to the initial withdrawal line, which we have shown to and shared with Hamas. When Hamas confirms, the ceasefire will be immediately effective. The hostages and prisoner exchange will begin, and we will create the conditions for the next phase of withdrawal, which will bring us close to the end of this 3,000-year catastrophe. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and stay tuned. Now, I'm going to focus on three things. Number one, look at this map. If you count how many divisions there are actually 12 slots in each of these areas. You can count them up yourself and you'll see 12 spots. This is in the Gaza area. And what do these lines mean, right? And again, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but I believe there is some hidden meaning in some sense behind this. And that 12 could infer to the 12 tribes. And again, it's not obviously this particular geography. It's much larger than that. But then that brings me to my next point. Look at what he says about 3,000 years. This went over a lot of people's heads, but let me remind you of what the Bible says. What was 3,000 years ago? It was about 1010 to about 970 BC. That was during 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, Psalms, talking about King David's reign. Do you remember? David united the 12 tribes of Israel into a single kingdom. He established Jerusalem as a political and spiritual capital. What did Trump do recently? He established in his first term Jerusalem as the capital. This is the time of many Psalms and the beginning of Israel's golden age. What does Trump always like to say? We are entering into this new golden age. The best is yet to come. The Ark of the Covenant was brought to Jerusalem. And many say that of all the artifacts, the Ark of the Covenant may be intact because that is the one where if you touch it, you die. And throughout history, when people were sacking treasure, you couldn't just sack the Ark of the Covenant because you would die. And people think it's like somewhere, maybe under the Vatican or something, but that's very interesting. During that time, Israel's borders expanded and it became a regional power. And what's happening now? Gaza and some of these land areas, if you want to say it's expanding or there's kind of a restoration, who knows? There's a lot of interpretation there with regards to the land aspect of what's going on. King Solomon's reign happened from 970 to 931 BC. This is coming from 1 Kings. Again, you can read all this yourself. I'm just summarizing it. But this is David's son Solomon succeeding him, and Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. Obviously a monumental event in Jewish history. It became the central place of worship for God, Yahweh. Israel prospered through trade and alliances, gaining wealth and being renowned. And Solomon, of course, was known for his wisdom, and a lot of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes obviously were written because of him. And after King Solomon's death, which is coming out of, again, 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, around 930 BC, the United Kingdom split into two. And if you know your Bibles, is Israel and Judah. The northern kingdom, the capital was in Samaria, and the southern kingdom, the capital was in Jerusalem. And of course, this division set the stage for centuries of conflict and prophetic activity. And of course, there's a lot of archaeological and cultural context as time progressed. The region saw fortified cities, the Hebrew script, complex trade routes, the Philistines, Phoenicians, Egyptians all had influence. And then we're seeing all of that kind of mixed through all the way down to today. What is the bottom line with regards to being 3,000 years ago? It was that Israel was at its political, cultural, and spiritual height. The time of David and Solomon, Jerusalem's rise, and the first temple construction. What is Trump implying when he says 3,000 years? Because that's not some arbitrary random number. Somebody, whether Bible scholars or somebody backing him, the white hats or whoever, they're allowing and understanding what's happening with Israel, maybe the archaeological and the artifacts or whatever it is behind closed doors and centuries of this conflict. Whether you want to bring in Illuminati and the world orders and the powers and all of that, something's happening. And in fact, this is what he says. He says specifically, stay tuned at the very end of this message. And if you go on the cue boards, there's a lot of posts talking about stay tuned. 3034 saying, do you believe that timing is a coincidence? Stay tuned. And more importantly, as many are talking about in this season, post 2301, red October, stay tuned and watch Q plus, and Q plus referring to Trump. And strangely, Trump has been referring to watching a lot. Even a few hours ago, he's talking about the Navy. The United States has the greatest military by far in the world. This will be a show of naval aptitude and strength. Enjoy watching, is what he says. It will be broadcast everywhere. A lot of his posts talking about watching, even he saying here regarding some interview, now I'm watching this interview. And even a couple of days ago, he mentioned about Sunday, October 5th, which is today, where he says, I believe the show must go on. And if you know, you know, but this whole movie, this whole show that we are watching, he continually refers to that. So I don't know what some of the crazy announcements might be, but if it refers to end times prophecy, especially with building the third temple that many of us already know about, if you've studied the book of Revelation or Daniel, something must happen in order for restoration and for the continuity of Israel to be fulfilled in terms of end times prophecy. And Trump took a very large step, especially in his first term, when he declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. And when he did the Abraham Accords, as well as all of the peace stuff that's happening right now, something's happening so that the unification, the restoration of some of the land of Israel is given back to the Israelites. And who knows how all of that works out, but one of the things that I personally believe, and this is just my own personal belief, is that a lot of the end times prophecies, they can't be fulfilled until the whole of Israel is recognized. So people talk about the countdown clock from like 1950 or 40, whatever, and they're saying, oh, like a whole generation, 80 years, 90 years, it begins with this. I believe none of that happens until all of Israel is restored back to the original form of the way it's looking from the Old Testament. And that's just a personal belief. I'm not saying like, oh, we have to take land and forcibly do it. Again, I don't want to confuse that. I'm just saying from a biblical prophecy perspective, I believe that all of Israel needs to be restored and actually recognized by the world. And so whatever this is with Trump and how he's going about all of this with the white hats, it's very telling with how it crosses with potential Bible prophecy. And I would love to know your comments below, what you think, how this is going to play out, what it means from an interpretation perspective, if there is any meaning or if this is still far down the line. I believe that we're not at the end in the sense of rapture and, Christ coming back like next week or even this year or whatever it is. I believe it's more long term because there's still a lot of things that needs to happen. But it's just very interesting to think about, especially as we're all into eschatology and trying to study the end times. For many of us as believers, we don't know the day or the time. Only the Lord and Christ knows that. But it's just crazy what it is in terms of how it's going to play out. One of the craziest things I do want to anticipate and I'm hopeful for is what this stay tuned means, what this watch means, because 2301 clearly says Red October, stay tuned and watch. So it will be very interesting to see how it turns out, what plays out, and all of that. So just wanted to give you guys my 2 cents on this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm also doing a fundraiser. We're trying to reach our goal. GiveSendGo.com/chrisyoonyt. All the information is down in the link below. Love you guys. Talk to you guys very soon.